Starting recording.
There they go.
All right. So to avoid legal snags, I'm supposed to tell you guys that you're being recorded. So you're being recorded.
Okay.
I don't give a shit if you got a problem with that.
Hey, real quick, sorry to do this. Let's just. I would imagine you can edit this so that we can. My dog just walked into the room and is going to freaking start barking at me and almost no. It's drinking on the toilet.
Dude.
Give me a. I hope no home. Well, gentlemen, I must say it's good to see you both.
It's great to see
you guys too.
You know what? I'm realizing right now, looking at your beautiful and bushy faces.
Yes.
That I have tremendous beard envy.
You do. Well, you have the very well coiffed beard.
Not by design. That's like it's like almost like male pattern baldness. I don't trim this at all. It's just like it grows kind of like in that weird jaw strap.
I've got the I've just given up shaving where the hairs go all the way down my neck like an old man.
Yeah,
I like that look.
I'm too lazy to trim this, and a guy that I used to work with at my last job, he referred to it as the "I've given up" look.
Well, that's the look I'm going for, and I can't achieve it.
Well, my wife is constantly, saying, "You've got something in your beard. I think it's part of dinner." And I'm like, "Oh, Judas Priest."
That's saving it for later, man.
They call that the flavor thing. Right on. Well, guys, we're here. I've gathered you here this evening to shine a spotlight on our friend Todd Keisling and his remarkable new novel that Taff is holding up, Devil's Creek, which is blurring because it should be censored in this country and in most others.
It's mostly censored in the South.
That's for sure.
The only words that aren't blacked out are the end.
Hold up as well. Yeah, so I think you can safely say that this novel falls within the canon of huge, epic horror novels that take place in small, claustrophobic towns.
Absolutely.
Which has a wonderful lineage, and it's one that I'm a big fan of. And you've been hearing me talk privately to you, Todd, about this for a year. This book blew me away, man. I think you knocked it out of the park, and I really think this is something you should be proud of. And I expect this is something that readers are going to really love, and this is going to be a really, really big move for you. So I'm super psyched, and one of the big reasons I wanted to do this. I mean, not only did I consider it to be incredibly entertaining, it's fucking terrifying, and expertly crafted. So I would put this alongside any book of its kind, and some of the books that come to mind are books like Salem's Lot,
right,
and Floating Dragon.
Yeah.
Floating Dragon is one of those sleepers that people don't really talk about. That's one of my favorite Straub stories.
Yeah.
I haven't read that.
Dude, you got to get on Floating Dragon.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I'll write it down. Writing it down.
Read all Straub.
Yeah, I consider Floating Dragon to be Straub's It. In fact, when I read it, I thought he was kind of cribbing it. And then I came to learn that he wrote it before it.
Yeah.
Because they're very, very similar stories.
Right.
Really? Okay.
But aside from that, obviously, we're here to put you on the hot seat, Todd.
That's fine.
I got a bunch of questions that are going to get you canceled.
Awesome.
But before we get into it, let's assume that someone might stumble across this that's outside our community of writers and readers. So just briefly introduce ourselves. Maybe, John, if we could start with you, just a quick introduction.
I'm John F.D. Taff, horror writer for 30 years or so. My most recent book was the serial release of a novel called The Fearing, which was another big book that instead of going the single volume method that Todd chose, my publisher chose to split it up into 4 chunks. So, but the omnibus version is coming out next year. So
nice,
the big old
chunk.
So that's me.
I love the big books, but I also think that was brilliant to break it up. I think that really worked.
It did work. I thought it worked.
Yeah, it did.
I don't know if I was talking to Todd. It was someone. If it wasn't Todd, anyway. And I was sitting there. I was just thinking, and I was like, how many people on planet Earth have successfully serialized an epic post-apocalyptic novel? And it's probably rarefied air. So you got to give it up when someone's doing something super unique. You know what I mean? I think that's fucking awesome. So
It's worked out well. I mean, I think both of you know that I just signed a contract a couple months ago for a company to develop a role-playing game out of the property.
Yes.
So
yeah, that's crazy.
I wrote a novella for that's set in the Fearing timeline, and they're going to be rolling a Kickstarter out for that whole thing in the next couple months. So that's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited.
I saw the cover for that floating around this week. So
yeah,
congrats on that, man.
Thank you. That's going really well. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right,
Todd, the guest of honor.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself, please, sir.
Okay. So, hi everybody. I'm Todd Keisling. I've been writing pretty much my whole life, so maybe not quite as long professionally as Mr. Taff here, but you know, we're quickly approaching I'd say the 15-year mark for me. But I write horror, weird fiction, and we're here because Brian wanted to, help raise the awareness of Devil's Creek, my new novel, which is coming out on June 16th. Okay. It's coming out June 16th. So from the time of this recording, 6 days, less than a week. Pretty excited and a little nervous, but I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody thinks about it.
Blind Pug says hi.
Hi, Blind Pug.
Which one is that?
This is Sadie.
Sadie
decided she would get around and wander around the room, but that's not allowed right now.
I love it. I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm Brian Kirk, writer of surreal and psychological horror. We've all been, I guess Todd and I have probably been writing around the same amount of time. Before we get into things, it just made me think, do you guys believe in the 10,000 hour rule? You know what? I was thinking about that earlier today. Have you heard of what that is? The 10,000 hour rule? Basically, in order to not master anything, but even if you want to be an expert in something, it requires a dedication of at least 10,000 hours. You know what I mean? So I actually think that there's something behind that. Evidently, I was looking it up today, and some assholes have debunked it. I don't know. I haven't looked into the debunking. Maybe it's debunked, but it's like, fucking just put in some work and shut the fuck up about debunking hard work. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Well, 10,000 hours may be arbitrary, but the philosophy behind it, I believe in.
I think I've last count, I think I've only put in about 3,000 hours, so fuck you.
Well.
I don't buy that at all. So, Todd Keisling, first question I have for you is at what point, if at all, while writing Devil's Creek, did you realize that you might have something a little extra special on your hands? Because I do think you have something a little extra special on your hands. I want to know if that ever raised to your level of awareness.
It started to occur to me probably around the 50,000 word mark when I realized that I'm nowhere near finished with this monster. So maybe special is not the right word, but I knew I had something unwieldy on my hands that if I didn't take my time with it and treat it with care, that it would get out of hand. Which I think the first draft maybe kind of did, because it was getting close to 200,000 words. And but I think it was probably toward like the last quarter when all these little threads that I had kind of built up and, in the context of the story, shit's starting to hit the fan. It's all coming together, and it's like, any writer out there who's written a novel will know this feeling, but it's like all these little things that you kind of had in the back of your mind that you wanted to get to or wanted to do, weren't really sure how they were going to connect, and it's like it's a serendipitous moment when you realize how it all fits together.
Yep. Right.
And that's for me, that's part of the magic of what we do. You know, I can't really explain how that happens or why that happens. But it was probably when that phase in the story where, you know, I kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know how to get there. It's just a matter of sitting down and doing the work to, you know, bring it home. And, you know, by the time I got to the end and, like, you know, kind of reflecting on the whole process, because that was the fastest I've written of something that length. I wrote the whole thing in about 10 months. And looking back on it and I was kind of surprised at how polished some of it was, that, you know, for a first draft, because usually my first drafts are pretty messy. I don't know anybody who doesn't have a messy first draft, but, you know, for me, it was extremely polished. And I think that might have been because I'd been living with this story in my head for years before I really felt confident enough to actually start working on it in earnest. So, yeah, I guess I kind of rambled a little bit, but I think that last quarter is where it really kind of, you know, hit home for me that I had something going on.
No, I think you said too. Actually, one of the ththings that you said is something that I've never heard anyone else speak out loud, but it's something that I've 100% felt, which is because especially for people that don't really outline it in a meaningful way. You know what I mean? I may have an arc, but there's always like a scene or a aspect of a character or something that I think is important, and I have no idea when or how it's going to, you know, manifest. Right. And you'll be writing, and you'll get to a point where you're halfway through the story, or maybe, you know what I mean? You're just like, well, I guess I may just have to abandon that thread because I don't see where it's going to, you know what I mean? I'm not going to force it in, and it's not appearing, and then all of a sudden, it's the perfect spot for it. Right. And that is a really, magical is the right word for it, but it's almost creepy, man. It's almost like, you know what I mean? There's like this little, you know, and I think in the word that just popped into my mind, I had to write it down when you were saying that, it was trust. You know what I mean? It's like, if you really just kind of abandon yourself to the story and give yourself over to the story and trust that it's going to come together how it needs to. It's magical how that shit happens. So I've never heard anyone else say that out loud. I'm sure that's a really common, you know, thing that happens with answers, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to articulate sometimes because it's just this thing that it was there all along. It just took that much time for you to find it. And I don't know, I guess it's that little demon on our shoulders that's kind of whispering these you know, forbidden truths to us the whole time we're writing.
Yeah,
go ahead, Todd.
Sorry.
John, I'm sorry.
For me,
no, I'm sorry.
That's a string of the same thing that I was going to ask you, which is that the thing that struck me most when I read the book was how comfortable you were with the story. So you had given yourself over to the story, but part of that comfort was also in the way that you write about small towns and small town religion. And I think that that speaks to your experience with both of those things. And I think that what I'm interested in is to hear you talk a little bit more about how your experience of both of those things informed how you wrote this book.
Okay.
That's a big question.
No, that's a big question. I'll try to be, you know, less rambly with this, and try not to go on a tirade about small towns and religion in general. So the town in the book is called Stauford, Kentucky. It's actually, the real place is Corbin, Kentucky. It's a, you know, small town right on I-75, about half an hour from the Tennessee border. It's a tiny town. I think when I lived there, it was about 8,000 people. Let's say it's probably around 15 or 20 now. It's grown a lot. And I grew up there, was born and raised there. Didn't leave until after I graduated college from the University of Kentucky in 2005. And I never felt like I belonged there. It was always this. I was always the outcast, the outsider. My friends were always the misfits who also didn't really fit in anywhere, and it just it felt wrong to me in a lot of ways. Like there was this very insular culture of people who, I guess, kind of like in the same way that back in the the turn of the 20th century, the Roaring Twenties and stuff. You had like new money and old money, and old money looked down upon new money because they didn't always have money. They were rabble at one point.
Right.
It kind of the same dynamic in town. There were families that were kind of held up on this pedestal because they had been in town longer. Their parents, the kids whose parents had graduated from the same high school that they were now going to, there were teachers there that knew their parents, and like they not really got preferential treatment, but from a social level, they were kind of like higher up here. They were also the more affluent families in town. And I grew up poor. Most of my friends grew up poor. It's southeastern Kentucky. I mean, it's not coal country poor, but it's
Right.
still, you're looking at probably a median income of like $25,000 a year, like barely above poverty level. And so it was kind of ironic because you had these families and kids of these families whose parents probably make slightly more than the base level, probably making $30,000 to $35,000 a year. So because they're living fucking high and mighty, the poor kids kind of got shit on.
Right.
And the thing that always bothered me about the religious side of the town is because all these kids whose parents were taking them off to church every Sunday, those kids you would see in church praising God and, making amends and whatnot, and then kicking your ass the next day in school. And, because, hey, they can go to church the following Sunday and beg for forgiveness and get it. So there's kind of this, I guess I was kind of at odds with the culture of the town from birth, I guess. I never fit in that way. I never felt comfortable with religion to begin with, especially because of the hypocrisy I saw there. And I kind of went more into detail on this with the guys on This Is Horror. We probably spent an hour talking about religion, period. That's going to get me canceled for sure. But that I was there for a while, even into my my late teens. I was making an attempt to try to fit into that mold, as far as religion goes, because I felt that was expected of me. And I never felt comfortable with it, but I tried so hard, and I felt like there was something wrong with me because while everybody else is praying to God, I'm just sitting there like, okay, so I bow my head, close my eyes, now what? Like, man, I can't wait to get home and play Nintendo. There was never a voice, from on high talking to me or anything, and I faked it to fit in. It still didn't work, still didn't fit in, but there right after I started college and kind of made one last attempt at trying to find religion and get in touch with my spiritual side. It just kind of fell to pieces there. So I guess all of that kind of fell into this melting pot, this cerebral goo up here when I was kind of figuring out what kind of story Devil's Creek was going to be. And I wanted to write a story that kind of delved into that small town dynamic, that also addressed the hypocrisy and danger of fanaticism in religion. So, I mean, there for a while, I was telling people it's the story. When they ask what the story's about, I tell them it's about how religion destroys a town in the span of about 4 days. And that's, spoilers, that's kind of true. But I also wanted to make it so that it's the outcasts who are the heroes. It's these social pariahs who are the ones that, come together and, to combat the forces of evil.
Right.
And also toward the end, to just kind of make it so that hopefully the reader realizes that maybe the town kind of deserves what's coming to it. Needless to say, I don't expect that one to be available in the Books A Million in Corbin, Kentucky.
Speaking of small town Kentucky, I became aware, I guess this year, through the documentary series. I guess there's a couple of documentaries. Hellier.
Oh yeah.
About kind of the cavern system within Kentucky and the alleged kind of paranormal, experiences that are associated with that. How is that something that is commonplace in Kentucky? Is that common knowledge? Is that something that you were aware of? Because
no, I had never heard of Hellier until I got turned on to that series on Amazon. I binge watched the whole thing because I'm like, when I realized that it was taking place in coal country, Kentucky, I'm like, holy shit! Like, I've been through that area. You're talking like right in the Appalachian Mountain range, and Ashland, where they had they went in there. That's right on I-64 when you cross over into West Virginia. I've been through Ashland, who the fuck knows how many times. I had no idea that was one of the places where there were Mothman sightings. I was always, I think Mothman, I think Point Pleasant.
Right.
So, it was kind of weird. Like I kind of grew up only hearing about the local stuff. Like there's an unsolved murder that happened in Corbin, like back in the 70s. Like they never caught the guy. This was about 10 years ago. They found a body locked up in a storage facility, like one of those storage rental places. They found a body there from someone like up, New Jersey or something, like that had been missing. Like weird shit has always happened in Corbin, but not to the level of like, paranormal investigation and Mothman. Because believe me, if it had, it would have been a lot cooler place to live growing up.
Yeah, would have had your purpose.
But it's kind of funny. A couple of years ago, Jeff Strand and his wife Lynn were traveling to some book thing in, I guess it was Michigan or something. They stopped in Corbin. And the only reason I know that is because they posted photos of them standing outside the original Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I'm like, Jeff Strand, what are you doing in my hometown? It was so bizarre for those two worlds to intersect, because that's probably one of the few things that my hometown is known for, and they embrace it for some disgusting reason. That my town is where Colonel Sanders perfected his recipe.
God bless him.
Sure.
Chicken.
Yeah, it was at like it was like some, gas station along I-25, which used to be the only highway through there at the time. So they've that whole spot has been renovated into what is now, in my opinion, the most disgusting KFC I have ever been in. Like the walls are just coated in grease. And they've got like a statue of him. They've got a bust in bronze. And they've got a fucking plaque out front. And you can drive by. And there's always people out front having their photos taken. with this goddamn plaque. And you have this mecca to fast food and high cholesterol, which just, in a way, just kind of sums up the whole Corbin experience, really.
That's great. Well, in a strange synchronicity that harkens back to Hellier, I had a Zoom lunch with Jeff Strand and Lynn Hansen today.
Yeah.
But real quick, so I mean, there are some scenes, some crucial scenes, if I'm correct, that take place in with the spoiler, but caverns are featured in your book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah. How about that?
So maybe there's more to this whole thing than you realize. Maybe you should be on the next season of Hellier.
Please no. I liked the show and thought it was really intriguing, but if I have to hear the word synchronicity one more fucking time,
I know, right? Yeah, that is
that's like take a drink. Every time you hear synchronicity, take a drink. That actually wasn't even on my mind when I was working on a lot of the scenes, like the whole underground aspect. I was more concerned about making it believable that there would be this, this domed hill in the middle of a forest that wouldn't have been documented. And you have the Adena tribes that have, and Adena isn't even that, we really don't know what the hell they were called. There's some guy back in the 1800s picked a name, the Adena, from something out of the Bible. Like, they were this unknown, Native American tribe that left burial mounds all throughout the Ohio Valley and into northern Kentucky, but no farther south. So I'm like, okay, artistic license. We have this. And it just so happens there was a church built on top of it because of, mystical things that happened around this area. And, it all kind of grew from there. That being said, the cavern network underneath the greater state of Kentucky is probably going to feature in my next novel. Well, not my next novel, but the one after that. So.
Nice. So, do you remember where the genesis of this came from? What the original idea? Where did that come from?
A few places. The urban legend of Devil's Creek, the place, the road. That was always something that I grew up hearing about. But the story always changed depending on who you asked, and there's no one left alive from that period of time who really can tell you what really happened. Basically, the gist is that there was a church. There really was a church toward the end of Devil's Creek Road, which, if you go Google that on Google Maps, Devil's Creek, Kentucky, right outside of Corbin, you'll see that it's literally in the middle of fucking nowhere. It is in the middle of a massive forest, like maybe a couple of miles from the Cumberland River. And like, why someone would think to put a church out there to begin with, I don't fucking know. Seems kind of creepy to me. But I grew up hearing that it was a place where the church used to be there. It was desecrated. It got burned down either by locals or some, it was burned down during one of these satanic rituals from the, this was all during the satanic panic period, so go figure.
Right.
All I know for sure is that there was a church. It's not there anymore, and kids go out there to party because spooky shit happens.
Sure.
I was forbidden from ever driving out there. My mom threatened to take away my keys, so that only fueled the interest in it. And so that's kind of like the foundation for this, right? So when I was in college, I had a really vivid dream of my great-grandmother driving me to a church in the woods. And there's like a whole scene at the beginning of part 3 in the book that is, with the very minor changes, identical to the dream I had.
That's cool.
And And when I wrote that, when I finally just wrote it out in the context of the story, I wasn't even sure if I was going to leave it in. But it came, to me, it was so powerful and kind of gives you some insight into the psyche of the main character that I decided to leave it. But that's a real dream that I had. I had it a couple of times. The set premise was always the same. We were driving out in this forest. We stop. We go across this footbridge. There's a creek, and we come across this clearing with this massive hill, just rising up out of the earth. And there's this, white, run-down, dilapidated church sitting at the zenith of this place. We go in. It's a dirt floor, and there's a hole. Yeah, exactly. We go in, and there's a hole in the floor, like somebody's carved it out of the earth, and there are steps. We go down, and there's this guy, surrounded by people who have bags over their heads, and they're kind of
dream.
This is from the dream. They got bags over their heads, and he's speaking in a language I can't understand, and these other people are just kind of swaying in motion to his words. And I finally begged my granny to leave because I'm fucking freaked out. And I should mention that in the context of this dream, I'm like 5 or 6 years old. And she takes us back upstairs, and as we're going, she becomes more aggressive in leading me up and telling me to go. You gotta hurry. And I become aware there's something coming up out of the earth after us. And that's always where the dream ended, because this thing would catch up to me. I would never see it. So you got that on top of that foundation of the spooky, urban legend. And, I had that dream all the way up until I moved here to Pennsylvania after graduation. And, the last time I had it was around 2007. And that's when I decided, okay, maybe I ought to, try to make a story out of this. And Devil's Creek, the legend really didn't fit in as much originally as I planned. It was more going to be centralized in the town. There used to be this old abandoned hospital in the middle of town that it was decommissioned after they built the new medical facility in the late 80s. That the Corbin Hospital sat abandoned for like 30 years because the town couldn't afford to get one of those giant bubbles because of the asbestos. And they finally tore it down. And when I really started digging into the story back in 2017, the hospital was gone by that point. So I kind of changed direction, made Devil's Creek the actual focus. Like everything kind of centers around that. So that's kind of the inciting incident for that. I mean, it's just a series of weird things that kind of came together to make this the roots of the story.
Yeah, that's cool. I like dreams that figure into stories.
Me too.
Because I've done that too, where I've had a dream that has stuck with me, and I'm like, I got to put that into something. So
yeah,
I like that.
You mentioned that you described the book as being a story about a town that religion destroys in 4 days, and then you said, and maybe it was a town that deserved to be destroyed. And obviously, you have some very kind of personal themes and very sensitive themes that I think you kind of address through this novel, and that you do very courageously. One of which is the ugly racism that exists in this town. And I was just curious kind of what, I mean, obviously there's a lot of personal, connections that you have to this story and how that factored in.
Yeah, that originally I resisted putting any of that into the book. And primarily because I was scared that I couldn't pull it off or do it justice. And I'm still not sure I did. basically in the history of my hometown. There, growing up, like, I had no interaction with black people whatsoever. It was a predominantly white town. The scene early in the book where Jack, the main character, is reminiscing about things with his grandmother as he's driving back through town, and the recollection of seeing a Klan rally on the steps of town hall. That's true. That happened. I remember seeing that. And I asked my granny, why are those men in white robes? And she just kind of said that they're bigots, and I didn't understand what that meant because I was really young, and she never brought it up again. And so the history, and you can Google this and find it. I did a little bit of research on this. So back in 1919, a large quantity of white men had basically just come back from the war.
Mm-hmm.
And while they were off fighting in Europe, a lot of black families had moved in because they needed workers. So there was like a whole section of town that was, just segregated. And something happened. There was a fight. So I've heard it a couple of ways. I heard it was a card game. I heard it was some kind of, some woman said that this black man accosted her, which was a no-no back then. And regardless of how it happened, basically a mob was formed. All the black families were rounded up in the span of a night, and they were loaded onto a train and sent south to Tennessee. And told not to come back. They weren't welcome. And that has always bothered me because, again, maybe this is why I also felt like I didn't fit in with when I was growing up there. But judging someone by the color of the skin, does not compute with me. I don't understand why you would. And it's oddly topical given what's going on in our country.
Yeah.
Creepily so when it's all started happening, and then I'm looking at the calendar, I'm like, well, fuck, the book comes out in the middle of all this chaos. But I also feel like I'm glad I wrote about it in the context of the story, because one, it provides some much needed background on why the bad guy's doing what he's doing. But it also, gives you some further insight into the culture of the town itself. And as someone who hasn't lived in Corbin for a long time, I'm not certain that it's getting better. It's gotten better. But something like that has to be just completely pulled up by the root and earth salted over so it can never grow again. So there was this whole thing kind of hanging over my head the whole time I'm writing this, because there were several instances where it kept trying to creep up in the story, and I'm like, I'm not sure I'm ready to go there yet, and finally I decided to say, fuck it, let's see how it turns out. And for me, it's kind of funny, going back to your question, John, about what was the moment. It's probably that moment. When everything kind of solidified and I realized the reasons behind a lot of what was happening. And I'm relieved that I wrote it. I'm worried that people aren't gonna like it or take it the wrong way. I tried to handle it as best I could. There are embellishments for the sake of the story, but it's based on a true piece of history. There are you can go and find the original news clippings from the Corbin papers from 1919. There was a documentary shot about the town in the late 80s that won a couple of film awards. You can find that on YouTube. It's called Trouble Behind. And I watched that in college, and I watched it again like after I finished the book. And it's kind of weird because you kind of see in this period snapshot of time from the late 80s, early 90s, give you an idea how long ago it was. There's like, you can see a banner advertisement on the local Hardee's when they're driving by in a video promoting Ghostbusters 2. So, they interview a lot of people that were, they're older folks at that point in time. And it's just kind of discussing the racism in the town. And like, you got it's obviously people in Corbin did not like the movie because it made them look bad, and rightfully so, because they fucking look bad. So that it was kind of vindicating a little bit for me to watch that after I'd written it and realize, okay, I think I got it right.
Right.
So it's a sensitive topic, but I feel like to look away from it would be disingenuous to the story and to the readers and to people in general. Racism is fucked up, and it needs to be.
It's such a big thread in most small towns that I don't know that you can write about small towns in America and not touch on that.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
But okay, you are. I'll give you this one, Taff.
No, it's. I mean, obviously, it's incredibly touchy, but I would hope that anyone that works to condemn racism, I would hate for that to be viewed negatively, other than by racists. You know what I mean? So
yeah, like I remember the day I wrote it, and you can't write about something like that without using that word. And I used that word for the first time in my writing career.
Yeah.
And I felt sick to my fucking stomach.
Yeah.
And to the extent that I considered trashing it, like just delete it. And I sent it to my editor, Amelia, and I sent it to Mercedes Yardley for sanity check. And both of them came back. It was unanimous. Do not cut this from the book.
Yeah.
So, I hope that readers kind of see where I'm, that it comes from a place it comes from a good place where I was writing from, just to kind of expose this part of my small town's history that I don't think it's ever really owned up to or faced.
Well, you got to do it in a way that is true to the character and true to the story, and yet isn't gratuitous. And I don't think, from reading the book, I don't think it is. So,
what am I hearing?
There's lots of pug activity beneath me, porking and sneezing, and
like, are they smoking? I mean, Jesus.
Yeah, you'd think that they would. One of them is constantly. You can hear her in the background.
One question I had, I don't know how much you want to get into the weeds of this, so we can cut it short if you don't. But I don't think most readers understand all that goes on behind the scenes to get a book published. You know what I mean? I think that oftentimes they think it's a fairly linear path from you write the book, you know what I mean? You submit the book, and then you know what I mean, and then the book gets
and then the money rolls in.
The money rolls in. I mean, being your friend and just seeing all the behind the scenes, it was incredible. The winding path that this book took to get to where it was, you know what I mean, and in the different iterations, and the word cuts, and then you know what I mean, and then just the, so I mean, writing the book is one thing. It's, getting it published is almost, an equally difficult feat, although completely different. So I don't know if you want to talk about maybe, the different stages it went through, or, the most significant cuts you had to make, and then, or
Yeah. So, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the original draft of the book was like close. It was close to 200,000. It was like 178, 176. I don't remember exactly. So I knew that it was going to be a challenge, but I felt like I had something to say, and I had a vision, and I knew that I wrote it to kind of be like a more modern take on the small town narrative, and it's great that you guys mentioned Salem's Lot earlier, because that was kind of my basis for how the story was structured. And one of the things that I love about Salem's Lot, the novel, and it was how King, that fucking dog. One of the things I love about Salem's Lot is how King goes about building up the town as a character. And he does that through these chapters called The Lot. And you get all these different scenes with miscellaneous characters from around town that never pop up again. Now, if I were to have any conversation with Stephen King, it would be, what kind of battle did you fight with your editor over those scenes? Because when my agent and her, co-workers finally got their hands on it, those were the scenes in my book that they wanted me to cut entirely. And I fought tooth and nail to keep what's there. So the original drafts, I was asked to get it as close to 120,000 words as possible, which would even then still be a stretch to sell to a mainstream publisher.
In there.
Yeah. And so I went through and I start making cuts and addressing notes, and typically in that process, you'll have someone go through and suggest cutting, like, they don't always suggest, okay, now that this has been cut, here's where you can stitch the other pieces back together. That's
right.
That's your job.
Right.
So it took me about a month to address all the changes and cuts and everything, and by the end, the word count was 146. So I cut a little over 30,000 words out of it, approximately 100 pages. A lot of the cuts made sense. There were, just from tightening up some of the writing, the language, I would say probably half of that was just, tightening up the word, the writing itself. So I got no problem with that. Every book could be better because of that. There were certain scenes that I cut that they were some darlings that I had to kill. Those hurt quite a bit. So there was like a whole scene involving this head nurse at the hospital, like a series of scenes. Like the whole idea was to take certain characters and kind of show them progressing through in the town over different points in time, so that you can kind of see, like, a window into their lives as they're being affected by all the shit that's happening. And only one character from those scenes survived. Well, his entire arc, that is. The head nurse from the hospital's psychiatric ward. There were a lot more scenes involving her that all kind of culminated in the nursing home, where her mother was, currently spending the last of her days. And that scene's a darling because of its gross out factor. Because the whole thing culminates with a massive geriatric orgy happening. And What's funny is I remember exactly where I was when I wrote that scene. I was sitting at the car dealership waiting for my car to get its tires rotated.
I'm surprised that's not a genre.
Geriatric orgies.
Yeah.
Get on that,
I
Brian.
think it's,
Yeah, there's a niche for you to fill, Brian. No
I think
pun
there's a
intended.
total. I don't, sorry, I'm going to get off track real quick when we come back. But you guys have heard all the stories about like senior living facilities, right?
Yeah, it's like a big.
They're basically orgies.
Yeah.
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 All
STD rates
STDs
in that
all the
work.
time.
Dude, I know what I'm. Yeah, well, I know what I'm writing next.
Yeah. There you go.
Right.
You can write.
No,
You can write erotica for seniors. Oh wait, Harlequin already has that genre. Cornered. Never mind.
no, but I saw you wrestle with all this stuff, and it was remarkable. Just the I mean, the way you kind of just rolled with the, not the punches, but just rolled with what you had to do, but also the way that you kind of, put your foot down where you needed to. You know what I mean? Like you said, you cut the book down to 146,000 pages. And that was cutting out
Words.
Sorry, 146,000 words.
I mean, it felt like 46,000.
Yeah, it is still it is, what I mean. So it's like, what are you gonna do from there? Like, yeah. So I mean, I think you handled it well, and I think you ended up in the right place.
Thank you. It was very important to me to preserve the vision that I had writing the book. I didn't want to chop it down to the point that it didn't resemble what I wanted to write. Like, if it had been cut that far, then it's a completely different book. It's a completely different story, and the meaning's lost. And I wanted to write a small town horror novel. Small town horror novels are long fucking books. So that's what I did. I pushed back when necessary, which ultimately I think made my agent's job a lot harder, because at the time we were trying to focus on larger big five publishers, and they're all telling us, I don't see why this story has to be over 100,000 words. Like, well, one, you haven't fucking read it, and two, I don't understand why your face looks the way it does. So
well, how about that?
To take that.
Yeah.
Yes, take that. Taff, how many? What was the word count on the Fearing?
The original, when I was done with like a solid first draft, was like 160. And I heard the same things that Todd did. You can't sell a book. You don't have the name big enough to pull off a book this size.
Yeah.
And I did what Todd did, which is I went to some people who had read the book. Josh Mailerman was one of them, and said, "Look, this is what they're telling me. What do you think?" And pretty much the consensus was, leave it alone. Leave it alone. Ray Garton, actually, with me, was the one who told me, who pretty much made up my mind. He was like, get the book where you want it to be, and find someone who will publish the book the way you want it published.
Right.
Yep.
That what kind of unlocked the door for me. Yeah, I think that you certainly have got to be open to making cuts and stuff, but I think when it starts to get to the point where it's going to turn the project into something other than what you intended, that's, I think, as the artist, as the creator, you've got to be willing to put your foot down and say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, it was a scary prospect doing that, because I'm expecting like my agent to be like, well, right, then I can't do anything with this. Good luck. And
right.
But at the same time, it's like I had to stay true to what I wanted to do, and I don't think I could sleep at night if I, compromise the integrity of that.
Well, and you obviously found someone who's bringing it to market the way you want it brought to market. So
yeah, Silver Shamrock has been great to work with. I'm very fortunate that James Newman was the one who sent Ken McKinley my way, so props to Jim for that. And the rest is history. Now we're 6 days away, which seems so surreal after this crazy ass journey it's been to get here. And and apropos, the world's on fire. So
there you go. Right.
So speaking of, so it comes out on Tuesday. What are the best ways that people can buy the book? Where would you want them to buy it from? What formats will it be available in?
Okay, so I've had this question quite a bit lately. It's currently available for pre-order on Kindle, Kindle format. A paperback edition will be available on the day of release because Amazon's being stupid. They don't let you do pre-orders on paperback books for some reason if you're an indie publisher. The paperback exists, I promise. It will be available there. Thunderstorm Books, yes, thank you. Thunderstorm Books is also doing a extremely limited hardcover edition. No word on the release date for that. It's going to be limited to 52 copies. They are all signed. I sent the signature sheets off a couple of weeks ago to the printer for binding. Francois Valancourt did the cover. It's amazing. I can't wait to hold this book in my hands because that cover is beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah, if you're the Amazon shopper out there, go pre-order on Kindle, wait till the paperback comes out. I am also soliciting interest on social media to see how many people want a signed paperback copy, because I got to place my order with the publisher very soon. So I will have signed copies on hand. I don't know how many yet, but you can find all that info on my website, toddkeisling.com.
Very cool. Taff, what do you got coming up, man?
Well, I'm just getting ready to turn the contract in for something I can't talk about, so let's not talk about it.
Okay.
But it's big. It's big.
I think I might know what that is.
I think you know what it is.
Yeah, that is big.
I think you told me what that is too.
Yeah. It's going to be big. I'm very excited.
I love it.
So we got the Fearing thing coming out, and then I'm finishing up the stories for this cosmic horror novella collection that I'm going to be doing with Nightscape Press. And then we're just getting ready to sign the contracts with Paul at Thunderstorm for the follow-up to I Can Taste the Blood, with me and Josh and Eric Johnson and Dan Stone for a book called Midnight Land, which is one novella each from all of us set in this small town. So excited about that. So yeah, I've got some irons in the fire right now. What about you, Brian? I'm reading your book, by the way.
Well, then we need to talk about that.
Oh yeah.
No, but not right now. Nothing that will be coming out anytime soon. I'm actually trying my hand at writing for little kid. I'm writing middle grade fiction at the moment, which I'm having a blast doing. It's so, what I found out. I really enjoy writing for unrestrained imaginations.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I like to tell juvenile jokes. So this is like.
Oh, we know.
You have found your home.
I think I found a sweet spot for a little while. Yeah. So I'm gonna groove down this lane a little bit, but I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And so that's about that's what I'm up to.
Great.
Nice.
Well, gentlemen.
Yes. This has been great. Thank you.
Well, good luck with the book, Todd. It's well-deserved, and I hope people will, be knocking the doors down to get it. It's a solid book.
I hope you're right, John. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, let's have dinner then. Let's cut this. Then we'll have a Zoom dinner, and then and then let's do a Zoom sleepover.
Okay.
And then let's have Zoom breakfast.
Well, as long as none of you sleep in the nude, I'm game.
All right.
Well, as soon as the camera shuts off, this shirt's coming off, guys.